Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Read Witch on the Holy Night. So, we learned what happened last night, and now Aoko has a mission to silence this mysterious onlooker when it was just Sojiro just being himself, which that'll probably get him killed anyways. So, the following day was a typically overcast one. The day's classes ended as they had started, uneventfully. Ooh. Ooh, smooth. Winter break was just around the corner, and with it, final exams. Yo, just like me for real. Although Misaki High prided itself on discipline, it was still a private school, and as such promoted a culture of independence among its students. Industrious students had a place to explore that side of themselves under the guardianship of the student council president. More easygoing students could spend their time after school as they wished, as long as they were mindful of personal responsibility. The fact that the poster boy of independence was the student council vice president indicated just how vast the spectrum was.
Aozaki, iruga?
Tobimaru Tsukiji threw open the door to the satellite student council room and the rumored location for their secret meetings. Despite all appearances, he was the student council vice president, who also happened to be the poor soul responsible for executing the student council's dirty work. One person was waiting for him in the cramped room. Student council president Aoko Ozaki sat imperiously, that's another rare word, in a folding chair, glaring at Tobimaru and his boisterous entrance.
相変わらず寒いなこの部屋。なあ、今度ストーブ購入しようぜ。
Hey, gets you in and out there faster. So as not to succumb to Aoko's oppressive silence, Tobimaru opened with some casual small talk.
お疲れ様。ところであんた、何しに来たのか分かってる？
まあな。ただ、事務的に話すのって寒いじゃねえか。
You know, it's scary when someone starts speaking to you in full sentences, you know?
少しぐらい世間話でもしねえとつまらねえだろ。
Tobimaru closed the door and sat down across from Aoko. He was holding a blue envelope.
こういう時は無駄口は叩かない方がいいわよ。なんとなくプロっぽいでしょ？
なる。いや。
Tobimaru was halfway to agreeing with Aoko before he caught himself and began to shake his head. As much as Tobimaru enjoyed the lack of red tape in his new line of work, he was not ready to turn full spy on his first day on the job.
それで、調べ終わったの？
ああ、ついさっき最後の聴取を済ませてきた。詳しいことはその封筒に入ってる。お前から渡された例のファイルもそん中。
He tossed the envelope onto the table.
そう。
Aoko picked it up and began to scan through the documents that were inside. She entered her own little world, not sparing the slightest bit of attention for Tobimaru. If ignoring other people were a skill, well, she would be a master at it.
なあ。
何？
一つ聞きたいんだけど。
Is he like, can I go now? If that's all you need?
だから、何？
The room was filled with a chilling silence. Aoko continued reading without an ounce of emotion upon her face. Though Tobimaru kept up an air of indifference, his stare remained fixed intently on her.
青崎、そういうの作って楽しい？
Oh, dang.
楽しいわけないでしょ。こんなの作ったところで、あんまり使う機会なんてないんだから。
そうか。ならいい。
Whether or not he was convinced, Tobimaru stood up from his chair with a disappointed expression.
最後まで読めばわかるだろうが、あんまり確証は取れなかったぜ。というより、おとといあの辺りにいた生徒はいないって話になりそうだ。まあ断定はできないけどな。
And, I mean, not every student will always tell the truth about all the places they would go to school, because that'd be crazy. No longer concerned over his task, Tobimaru headed toward the door, as if to say it was out of his hands.
そうだ。そういえば、一人だけ該当しなかったやつがいる。季節外れの転入生までは、青崎も調べきれなかったみてえじゃねえか。
Oh, well, there you go. Aoko raised her head ever so slightly. He was right. The recent transfer student was not included within the scope of her
そ
investigation.
んなわけで、その字に関しては調べてないぜ。まあ、あいつならいつだろうと遅くまでバイトだろうが。いや、人殺しを見たなんてこと口走ってるようじゃ、家で悪い夢でも見てたのかもしれねえか。
Oh, you just... Oh. Tobimaru cheerfully left the student council room. Yeah. Simultaneously, Aoko felt her fingers go numb, and the document she was holding spilled all over the table because he just said the exact thing she was looking for.
そんな、まさかね。
She broke out into a cold sweat and tried to tell herself that there must be some kind of mistake. However, the uncomfortable feeling in her gut would simply not go away, perhaps because her intuition was almost always right at times like these.
バカらしい。
And yet, she knew what she had to do. She would not have hesitated to kill Tobimaru if he had been the witness. But if it was him? Just considering the possibility caused her blood to run cold. It's the difference between killing just a random thing and a thing of pure innocence. Aoko put her forehead in her hands and began to brood. And then suddenly... Whoa. Let us talk choice. You'll always be faced with choices. A virtuous... So this sound... Because the grandpa has not been voiced. So I think this is the grandpa then. A virtuous fool and a wicked sage. You cannot save both. You must pick one. That is the freedom granted to you. 2 years earlier, Aoko muttered the words offered by her grandfather the day she replaced her elder sister as his successor and let out a sigh of lament.
すごくバカみたい。
She laughed at her own intuition, but it was no joke. If only those words had never been said. Aoko locked up the student council room and left for the day. Calmly, as though nothing untoward had happened, she greeted the students as they passed by in the halls. She was almost shocked by how natural she seemed. There were still plenty of students at the school. The grounds were noisy with the chattering of students who had finished the day but had yet to head home. Others still had club activities. The gray sky looked ready to pour, but nobody seemed to pay it any mind. Amidst the clamor, Aoko hastened to the school gate. She passed by some students in animated conversation. They seemed to be talking about their after-school plans. Apparently, they were adamant about maximizing their free time. She could not figure how they could possibly be so irresponsibly focused on fun, but at the same time was in no mood to make fun of or feel envious of them. 2 short years prior, she had been just like
目
them.
は覚めてるのかな、私って。
She retied her scarf, this time more tightly to give off an air of solitude, but she was fooling no one. After all, what people who feign solitude are really masking is rejection.
そうよね。孤独っていうのはああいうのを言うもんでしょうし。
The area by the school gate was busier than usual. A group of boys appeared to be huddled behind it. Their transparent attempt to be discreet in terms of both location and loudness of voices did nothing to hide the fact that they were noisily arguing about a girl standing alone on the other side of the street. What are you doing here? The girl was cloaked in a black cape. At first glance, it could have been mistaken for normal attire, but those from Misaki could tell she wore the uniform of a prestigious girls' school. Yo, that's their uniform? I thought those were her casual clothes. Said school had no connection to Misaki High in any way, shape, or form. The two schools were miles apart both physically and spiritually. A member of that school's student body was a rare sighting, as the majority were forced to live in the school dorm. Rain Girls Academy had a reputation as a school for princesses, and it was rare indeed for one to be slumming with the common folk. That alone would have been enough to cause the ruckus among the boys, but this girl looked the epitome of class. One could not help but describe the standing figure as charming. The way she silently, motionlessly waited was reminiscent of a meticulously composed portrait. Aoko took one look at her before instantly recalling that one word: solitude.
まったくうちの男子どもは家に帰りもせず陰でこそこそやってるのはそういうこと。
Disgusted, Aoko barged through the gate. At this point, she would normally head home, but today she crossed the street toward the waiting girl.
あれなるは生徒会長様。くそ、追っ払う気なのかよ。痛いんならいつまでだっていさせてあげればいいじゃんか。てか怒られるのあの天使。よその生徒でも校門前にいるぐらいなら別に
She's technically not.
ないと思う。
She's technically not. She is within her right to stay there, but that's not why she's coming over.
青子女子は容赦ねえからな。下手すると平手だぜ。平手。
The boys ran their mouths behind her back. Not in the mood to shut them up, Aoko walked right up to the girl and offered an informal wave.
どうしたのアリス？こんなところに来たって何も面白いことはないって言ったのに。
ありえねえ！
That's very anime. Aoko heard the boys by the gate lose their collective minds and did her best to ignore them.
あのことを確かめに。青子、あの人たち邪魔なんだけど。
わかってる。今追っ払うから。
In contrast to Alice's small voice, Aoko spoke loud and clear. Naturally, this was on purpose, so as to deal with the riffraff by the gate all at once.
会長こっち来んぞ。
The sports uniforms that they're wearing is the same one that Taiga wore at the time. That's good. I like it.
おい押すなよ。後ろのやつどけって。俺校舎に逃げるから。いやでもあの子会長と知り合いなんでしょ。うまく会長に紹介してもらうとか。
Buddy, that's not how it works. Yeah.
さすが一年坊主。まだ戦場の現実ってもんを理解していねえ。よし、死の間際までいい夢見ろよ。
Perhaps because too many of them had gathered in one place, the mob entered a frenzied panic as they tried to escape. Aoko addressed them all.
さーて、部活動があるわけでもなし、ただ家に帰るだけの帰宅部の皆さん、こんなところで何を集まってるのか教えてくれる？
The student council president stared daggers at the boys.
何しろ試験前だもの。身になることなら私も教えてほしいけど、まさかガン首並べて女学院のお嬢様を眺めてただけなんてことはないわよね。
There is poison in that voice. There is venom. I can hear it.
声をかける勇気もなくて眺めてただけなんてことは。
Holy crap. Calm down. Not one of them was brave enough to admit that this hit the nail on the head. If any of them had such courage, they would have already been chatting the young lady up.
いや、僕教室にちょっと忘れ物が。こんなオチならダメ元で玉砕しとくんだった。天文部に行って双眼鏡借りるのどうだ？
That's
屋上
weird.
からお顔を賜るとか。
That's strange. Don't do that. No.
天文部にそんなのねえよ。あるとしたら野鳥同好会じゃね？
They would though, but don't do that. That's weird also.
それ先月会長が潰したじゃん。鳥めでてる暇があるなら彼女作れって。
ああ、彼女作れですか。すみませんす。今日は裏口から帰るっす。ザキさん。
Zaki is a good nickname.
くそ、じゃあな会長、また明日。
And with those oh so charming remarks, the boys scattered with their tails between their legs.
楽しそうね、青子。
わかる？
Yeah, it's very obvious. Aoko's response slipped out all too easy. In truth, there was not too many bad apples at Masaki High, and dealing with them wasn't that bad.
で、ここまで出向くってことは何かわかったの？
結界に残っていた気配の識別は、あとはここで確かめればいいだけよ。
そう。アリス、いつからここに？
下校時刻から。
So she'd been here for roughly an hour. Oof. Standing in the same place for an hour would be taxing for someone as sensitive to the cold as Alice.
悪いわね、無理させて。
I'd say, if we had cell phones, that would be fixed, but that doesn't exist really at this point in time.
別に好きでやってることだから。
As she spoke, her black eyes were fixed upon the gate and the students passing through it. She had likely been observing the gate in this manner for the past hour.
私を待ってたわけじゃないんでしょ？今からでも付き合うわ。
Alice nodded in assent. If Alice was still here, it meant she had not found the witness yet. If she had found this student, Alice would have already gone home ahead of Aoko and began to research the student's background.
私の方はダメだった。
Oh, she's protecting him. She reported the results of Tobimaru's investigation. Alice remained silent. With that, the conversation ended, leaving the two of them to silently endure the freezing wind. The silent stakeout dragged on endlessly. Students continued to pass the gate, each shocked at the sight of the unusual combo, and head home. After 20 minutes, Aoko let a sigh escape her mouth, perhaps from boredom, perhaps from the cold, or perhaps from both.
ねえ、アリス。帰り黎明に寄ってかない？
Aoko quickly turned to Alice to catch her reaction. Dawn was the name of one of Aoko's favorite coffee shops. Offering no clear indication as to whether she was critical of Aoko's blasé attitude or agreeing to her whims, Alice's gaze shifted ever so slightly. Aoko followed her stare.
あれ、青崎も待ち合わせか?
Okay. The sudden voice took her off guard. There was only one person who spoke with this gentle, good-natured tone.
そう。やっぱそうなるわけか。
There it is. Turning her back to Alice, Aoko moved her focus to the newly appeared student.
それで、今日は何の用？
All politeness flew out the window. Already in a bad mood, Aoko's mood plummeted the longer she looked at Sojiro. The subtlety of her expression, however, was lost on him.
いや、これから駅前で水泳部の部長と待ち合わせなんだけど、そのことでお礼を
Oh,
言ってお
you're
きたくて。
making it hard, bro.
Hmm.
Well, that was completely unexpected. Thanks? Joining a club? Aoko had a hunch that he was about to say something brainless.
ふーん。お礼って、お礼参りってこと？
Fortunately, Sojiro was completely unaware of the more sinister implication to the word payback.
よくわからないけど、そんな大したことじゃないよ。ただ、水泳部は夏までそう忙しくないって話だったから。
Sojiro was just about to thank her for recommending a club that would not take up much of his time when Aoko cut him off with an expression of disinterest.
当然でしょ。幽霊部員になりそうな生徒なんて紹介できないから。忙しいあなたでも務まりそうな場所があったから口に出しただけよ。
And Alice is like, you're kind of mean to him.
なるほど、無駄がないね。
His open admiration for her sapped Aoko's will to fight. Finding a suitable club and negotiating with his captain hadn't been an efficient use of her time at all.
とにかくお世話になったから、それで礼を言っときたくて。
Sojiro gratefully dipped his head, but not before the flustered Aoko stopped him.
よしてよ。今あなたにそんなことされても迷惑だから。それで、水泳部はどう？やっていけそう？
An awkwardness infiltrated her previously sharp gaze. Sojiro was about to pick up on the odd change in her behavior, but could not divine its reason. So he simply started with what he knew so far and reported the most recent information he had.
ああ、水泳部はクビになった。
Oh!
なんでよ！
Aoko instinctively shouted at the unexpected response. Like a human jack-in-the-box, this unexpected development threw her mind into tizzy and she momentarily forgot the complicated feelings she had been wrestling with.
だって今から待ち合わせだって。
それは、これからヤシロギの温水プールに連れて行ってくれるから。
Oh, is it gonna be that you can't swim? Which would be very strange for a country boy to not be able to swim. That's a city boy thing. Sojiro stated this very matter-of-factly to the still reeling Aoko.
話がつながらない。そこまでうまくいってるのに、どうして入部を拒否されるのよ、あんたは。
そりゃ、俺が泳げないからだろ。
Okay, that's sus. What country boy can't swim? I feel like that's just... There's rivers everywhere. There's beaches. Well, but wait, no, he was a mountain boy, right? Okay, maybe. Aoko reached up with her fingers and pinched the bridge of her nose as she processed his answer.
しずきくん、昨日の私の質問は覚えてる？走るのか泳ぐのか、どっちがいいかってやつ。私の記憶は正しいけど、一応確認しておくわね。あなた、確かに泳ぐ方だって言ったけど。
He's like, I really don't like running.
ああ、昔から 泳げないのはなんとか克服したかったんだ。
Oh.
反対に走る方は得意だけど。
Oh, you completely misinterpreted what a club is. Her energy spent, Aoko finally understood.
俺が1年なら1から鍛えてくれたらしいんだけど、あと3ヶ月で3年になる身分なのに金槌の部員は雇えないそうだ。けど部長が親身になってくれて、これから泳ぎを教えてくれることになったんだよ。
I'm gonna be honest. I don't understand how people can't swim. It's tough to not float, you know? The body just wants to float. How do you not? Sojo's words were spoken from a place of joy, a fact that failed to reach Aoko.
はあ、つまり欠陥品を売りつけたってわけか。こりゃ水泳部の部長に合わす顔がないと。ちょっと待った。
Wait, what?
しずきくん、水泳部の部長って。
Who? She stopped herself short of a girl. She was afraid of how that might look, that she might not be able to rein herself in if she started.
もういいわ。気持ちは分かったから、どこか遠くにいてくれない？少し疲れてて、とてもじゃないけどあなたの相手はしていられないの。
飛び丸もそんなことを言ってたな。青崎は昨日と今日珍しく疲れてるって。何かあったのか？
Boy, he always has a shovel in his hand to dig a deeper hole,
ちょ
huh?
っとね。でもいいの。解決したみたいだから。それより、しずきくんはどう見える？私、そんなに疲れて見えるのかな？
Why had she asked him this? Blurting out things for no reason and on impulse. This was not usual for Aoko. Perhaps it was because she realized that this would be their last chance to have a normal conversation. After a few moments of contemplation, Sojiro conjured up a grin that cut straight through the tension.
そうだな。疲れているというより生き生きしているように見える。仕方なく畑を耕していた狼が久しぶりに狩りに出ることになって機嫌を上げている感じだ。
Bit of a strange metaphor. Don't know how many wolves plow fields, but okay. He seemed so cheerful. Like he was so happy for her. Without thinking, Ako's hands went to her cheeks. What he said were true, and she was grinning from ear to ear. There was just no way she could have made such a mistake.
とにかくありがとう。じゃあ、また明日。
Perhaps still not comfortable enough to wave to her, he said his goodbye with sincerity in his voice and smile, and took his leave. Not even a little wave? I could not say goodbye to someone without even a little wave.
待って。こんな話があるの。聞いてから言って。
Aoko called out after him. Her voice was cold, as she admonished herself for having been somewhat affable earlier.
意味のない例え話よ。そうね。あなたが空腹で死にそうな時、目の前に同じように空腹で死にそうな2匹の動物がいるとするわ。
Okay, so I thought she was gonna say, let's say hypothetically you were at the park last night, what did you see? No, she's doing this.
しずきくんに銃をあげる。それでどちらかの動物を撃って。
It's the same one.
右はライオンで、左は子猫。選ぶのはあなたの自由だから。
Is he gonna say, well, I wouldn't shoot either of them? It was a fable-like moral dilemma, especially the way in which it was cruel and rather preachy. The kind that if you thought too hard about, you would never find an answer. Sojiro answered quickly and calmly.
いや、撃たないと思うよ。
There you go, yeah.
だって自分の好きにしていいんだろ。それにほら、空腹ならお互い様だ。
He was not in the least fazed by the dilemma. He gave the most innocent response. So innocent, in fact, that it would give anyone pause.
長生きするわ、あなた。
And I wonder if that was her answer as well.
すごいセリフだな。そんなことを言われたのは多分君が初めてだ。
I feel like her answer would have been, I would find a way to save them both. Right? Which again, very fate stay night. Adorning his face was a smile, wholly out of sync with his comment.
何よそれ。
She regretted stopping him. If only she had just watched him go, conversation never would have happened. Sojiro Shizuki made his way down the sloped street. Today, just like every day, he probably had to work late again. Only Aoko and Alice remained, with Alice doing what she could to simply blend in.
つくづくこっち ちのペースを乱してくれるわね。あの人畜無害の田舎者は。
Aoko clenched her right fist tightly as she cursed out loud, anything to prevent herself from screaming at the top of her lungs. Whether that scream would be directed towards Sojiro or toward herself was another matter entirely. Aoko heard Alice's soft voice behind her. Aoko knew what she was going to say, as she had known for the entire time. Ever since Alice, having shown no reaction to any of the other students, changed her expression upon seeing Sojiro.
言わなくてもいい。あいつでしょ、目撃者は。
Her voice was cold as ice. It was the voice of someone talking about a complete stranger. The lion and the kitten. There are pros and cons to choosing either of these animals, the point being that she asked him to choose one of them. In terms of risk, the lion was the more dangerous choice. The instant the gun was pointed at it, there was a chance it would fight back. Those who chose the lion required more courage, but any sense of guilt that came with holding a gun would be forgotten. Lions are fierce creatures, a poor excuse to shoot an animal, perhaps, but one that could certainly help alleviate the guilt. What about the kitten, the weaker creature? It goes without saying that the kitten would be the easier target of the two, but choosing it would be a disquieting decision for anyone. Even if the kitten had no chance to survive, it was still too senseless to carry out. And to Aoko, Sojiro was that choice.
てっきり私もそうだと思ってた。
She truly didn't want it to be him. When she had felt that sinking feeling in the student council room, she ignored it. There was no getting around what must be done, she told herself. Until that is, Sojiro went and said what he did, causing her resolve to waver. But the discomfort in her chest did not stem from any guilt she may have felt. She could care less for Sojiro. He was weak and would be incredibly easy to deal with. Yet for some reason she could not dispel her reservations. A transfer student who moved to the city from the middle of nowhere with no family to speak of. Few would notice if he were to suddenly disappear compared to a person of some renown. If she were to kill him, it would be as simple as wringing Kat's neck. And it all served to just piss her off. It was too lucky. Like everything was neatly handed to her. She wanted to just drop kick it right into orbit.
信じられない。私嫌がってる。これは違う。
Oh, she's distraught by this.
こんなの私じゃない。
Standing behind her, Alice heard all of the muttering. Nevertheless, she seemed to ignore it and said,
彼、首に布を巻いていたわね。
Yeah, can we talk about that finally? A wholly unrelated topic. Thank you for addressing the elephant in the room. Aoko returned to her senses.
ええ、水泳部の首とかけていたのかしら。
What? Alice had put much thought into this, as if it had a deeper meaning to her somehow. No, what?
そ
No.
ういえば、あいつ初めて会った時も首に布巻いてたっけ？襟を行儀よく締めてるから目立たないけど。
The conversation turned to idle nonsense, and though it solved none of her current problems, it did help calm Aoko's frazzled nerves.
サンキュー。落ち着いたわ、アリス。それと、気合も入った。善は急げ。あいつが言いふらす前に決着をつけよう。
Pumped once more, Aoko turned her back to the school gate. For now, they would retire to the mansion and prepare for battle. Hey, can we not play this song more? That'd be nice. Sometimes it lets me put it in and not worry. Sometimes I need to
どこ
actually
で彼を殺す？
talk over it so it doesn't have the trip go off. Whatever. She said quietly as not to be overheard by anyone else. Normally, Aoko had to rein in that side of Aoko, out in the open as they were. But this was far from a normal situation.
今日の夜、場所はとっておきの夢の国よ。
Oh. She gave a fearless laugh, a strangely pleasant sound like the kind one would make when meeting their lover. Well, thankfully it was quite short, I guess. Her as she is now, Knight of the Witches 1. Ooh. That was these ones here. Girls of the Night, so what if it's uncharacteristic? Resolve night calls. I'm trying to figure out if the colors mean anything. Right? Is blue like mansion life? I think blue is mansion life. Red is school? No, I don't know. There must be some pattern that I just don't know. Okay, well, let's go to the next episode. I have no idea how long they are, so because of that, we're absolutely going to be cutting around to wherever. It really doesn't matter. Night of the Witches 1. Look at this title screen. Sojo returned to his apartment on foot as per routine under a blanket of clouds in the night sky. The rusty stairs of his apartment building clanged with each step. Out in the corner of his eye, you could see the bicycles parked by the apartment building's outer wall. He debated the pros and cons of a bicycle, how much easier life would be versus the expense, the convenience versus the necessity, but in the end, decided one was not right for him just now. Clutching the bag of apples under his arm, he took out the key to his residence. He tilted his head in confusion. More and more he found himself preoccupied with such random thoughts, when the real issue at hand was deciding what to do with the apples he had received. Oh, don't tell me you get paid in apples, bro. Because, like, man, you might be like, oh yeah, it's like, I could pay you in money or apples. And be like, well, the apples are good because then I don't have to go to the store. Even though, like, you would get absolutely swindled. You would get paid more money than what you would get for apples. He placed the paper bag by the sink and switched on the lights. It was just after 10 in the evening. With the end-of-term exams just around the corner, he had come home an hour earlier than usual. As he made back for the kitchen to pick one of the apples to snack on, he found an envelope stuffed in his mail slot. The envelope had no name, return address, or stamp. Inside was a single piece of paper that only had the sender's name and a short message. It read,
話があるので、今夜どこそこのここに来られたし、大事なようなので、来るまでずっと待っている。言うまでもなく、他言無用。
A concise set of orders neatly written. It was signed Aoko Aozaki. She even has a custom robin paper. She had been considerate enough to enclose a detailed map of the meeting place. I was going to say, that didn't say where to meet. Puzzled, he cocked his head to the side, then headed out the door. He just does it. No internal debate, he just does it. Afterward, upon the room's sole tenant leaving the premises, the envelope burst into flames and evaporated without a trace, as though it never existed in the first place. That's cool. That's cool. By the late 80s... Okay, we're learning about the bubble economy. By the late 80s, Japan's post-war economic boom had somewhat stabilized and the city experienced a period of steady growth. The city's modernization marched on, and the Japan Railway's train station, a symbol of the new era, neared completion. In Masaki's neighboring town of Yashirogi, a new symbol of its own was about to be born. What is this Persona stuff? Yashirogi bred and kitschy land. It was Masaki's worst investment. Years later, it would be dubbed the fool's gold of the economic bubble, a relic of a bygone age. What am I looking at? Whoa, what is this symbolism? 10 years ago, Yashirogi's renowned Tokitsu Baking Company ran factories all across the nation. Its proprietor was a middle-aged gentleman, then aged 56, by the name of Yurihiko Tokitsu, known affectionately by most as Topan, pan of course meaning bread. He took it upon himself to begin development on an estate on the outskirts of Yashirogi and broke ground on a recreational wonderland that he hoped to be the pride of Misaki City. The long-awaited opening came in 1981. After 3 years of investment, this local amusement park, full of all kinds of hopes and dreams, began its short-lived tenure. It covered more than 85 square acres. Its magnificent merry-go-round dazzled all who passed through the park's gates. What is this symbolism? Its roller coasters twisted and turned about the edges of the park like a writhing Japanese dragon. Its Ferris wheel, packed beyond necessity with gimmicks, was said to have tested the limits of modern engineering. Old Yurihiko looked upon his creation and smiled. Only boosting his confidence was the fact that its grand opening was staged during a period of prosperity, the springtime of the world. But, in spite of this, they splendidly miscalculated the balance between aspirations and sophistication. Its mascot, Kitchi, was poorly designed and appeared like a cheap knockoff. Oh my god. The park was stuffed to the brim with bread stands. Even its impossible to navigate mirror maze seemed out of date from the start. There are no dreams to be had at Kitschy Land, only nightmarish satire. Numerous trade magazines lambasted Kitschyland's shortcomings, and customer attendance declined. There was even an incident where a 6-year-old strayed from his mother, had an accident, and nearly died. 1986, 5 years after the park opened, the situation had grown from bad to worse, and the park was hemorrhaging money. On top of everything, Yurihiko, who had bet everything on the success of the mascot Kitschy, retired, and Kitschyland's operations were officially in trouble. And thus, amidst the scorn of nearly all the residents of the area, ended Misaki City was one and only amusement park. What's more, perhaps best described as a footnote to this debacle, the self-proclaimed Parisian artist who designed the mascot, Toki Julich, was said to have snapped his brush in mourning over the closure of the park. Returning to the present, I love... That was a JoJo pre-chapter, narrator thing. It was midnight, and the Kitschyland of today was a shadow of its former glory. Like a doll abandoned in the corner of a toy box, the lonely park was illuminated only by the light of the town that continued to live around it. Sojiro closed the Ashirogi guidebook that he picked up on the way here. The story of its history was almost difficult to believe, but he supposes what people referred to as entropy. The park's front gate was unlocked. When he worked here the previous time, the iron fence was locked shut with a rusty chain, but the chain was nowhere to be seen and the gate left ajar. This dude is so innocent, he totally trusts getting a letter saying come to this abandoned amusement park in the middle of the night. He's like, okay, sounds good. If we have to talk, we have to talk. Like, buddy, wow. Following the map drawn in the letter, Sojiro quickly made his way inside. Sojiro complained, quite out of character for him. It was probably because, in spite of his naivety, even he knew something was amiss. Okay, he does. Though the park was abandoned, this was still trespassing. Unlawful entry, larceny, burglary. Well, these were certainly not things, or perhaps crimes, that Sojiro was proud to do, but... Money. The real... Oh, really? That's why? The real reason his conscience was gnawing at him. He clapped his hands together in apology toward the statue of Kitschy, on whose eyes the paint began to aptly dissolve. Sojiro passed the mascot, bleeding red paint from its eye sockets, began to walk the night park. The building's colors had faded. The collection of machines was rusted. The man-made residents no longer felt the passage of time. Even the ghosts themselves could not endure the disparity between this forsaken place and its previous grand stature. It was like a fossilized dream. These were the ruins of a paradise both created and abandoned by man and reality. The economy had stabilized, and their standard of living was on the rise. Nobody was overly concerned with the future. Can you imagine that time? Oh, these were the remains of a wild and exciting era. His breath turned to white wisps before him. Sojiro continued through the abandoned amusement park. Though void of human presence, this was not nearly as frightening as the darkness deep in the mountains. City suburbs can take many different forms, but Kitschyland was unusual for an amusement park insomuch as it had been built adjacent to a residential district. The park was surrounded by a forest, but even that ultimately was man-made. It was no different from the curtains on a classroom window. If you were to scale the iron fence encircling Kitschyland and break through the 20 yards of afforested trees, you could make it back to the familiar townscape. Though the amusement park tended to arouse dread in the city folk, to Sojiro it was a little different from the commotion and terror of downtown. I love abandoned amusement parks as an aesthetic. It's so strong. The central plaza was as silent as a grave. According to the map, the meeting spot was west of here. Waiting for Sojiro at his destination was a rugged, imposing, magnificent castle, towering before the backdrop of a cloudy night sky. Even for an abandoned park, it was a remarkable structure. If the roller coasters and Ferris wheel were loud, intense attractions, this was, in comparison, quiet and easygoing. It was one of Kitschyland's 3 iconic structures and, in a way, the wicked fortress that guided this paradise down the path of closure. Generally speaking, amusement park mazes generally fall into one of 2 categories: a labyrinth, which disorients its visitors with its sheer size, and a House of Mirrors, which disorients visitors with optical illusions. Many of the labyrinth's guests enjoyed the brief sense of adventure that it afforded. Over the years, however, it would be usurped by the ever-increasing thrills of new attractions, such as the way of all trends, the curse of fads. The new must give way to the newer. On the other hand, the House of Mirrors was a time-honored, beloved staple. Even within the confines of a classroom's dimensions, well-placed mirrors and well-directed light could both perplex and delight its visitors. And figuring in the cost of maintenance, a well-designed House of Mirrors could far outlive its labyrinth brethren. Even if both types faded into obscurity, they would remain a staple of what constituted an amusement park. However, that didn't mean that combining them would produce double the fun. Together they were talking about the mirrors, right. Together they transformed from entertainment into an uncanny realm from which those who dared to step within could never leave. In a similar sense, Kitschy's Mystery Tour Castle was the park's very own otherworld. Indeed, 5% of visitors ended up requesting staff assistance to get out. Modeled after European castles, it was greater than a football field in length, and its interior was further split into 3 floors. 2 floors above ground and 1 below, lined with mirrors from top to bottom, equal parts complex and vast. The maze demanded at least 30 minutes even from veterans. Jeez, that's terrifying. One visit was all it took to be struck by catatrophobia. Oh, what is that? Is that a fear of mirrors? What is that? Oh no, I need to actually type. Catatrophobia. What is that? Yeah, fear of mirrors. I was right. Cool. It was this labyrinth that now stood in Sojiro's way.
真っ暗ってわけじゃないな。電気とかついてるんだろうか。
Can you imagine a time before everyone had cell phones that was a flashlight in everyone's pockets? It seemed that Sojiro, unaware of what a House of Mirrors even was, concerned himself only with its lighting. He checked the letter from Aoko once more. The letter read, "I'll be waiting in the first floor lobby of the House of Mirrors." That meeting place was definitely in here. There was something to see. There was something to see by, at least. Oh yeah, as he could make out light faintly through the open doors. Putting aside his suspicions, he headed toward the entrance. The sound of his steps against the brick-laden path echoed faintly. He was far from the hustle and bustle of the city. The park's clocks no longer made tick nor talk, and the winter's bite no longer blew in the night. From within the silence, the stillness would cause any onlooker to hold their breath. Sojiro stopped abruptly at the entrance of the House of Mirrors.
ところで青崎、そんなところで何してるんだ?
He called out, turning back toward the plaza. A sound rang out as if someone had dove behind a garbage can and had fell to the ground in their haste. A short silence ensued. For a moment, the abandoned park returned to its previous hush. Resigned to her having been exposed, the girl appeared from her hiding place. My dude is a tracker. What is those pants?
Oh.
That's a good outfit, too. That's a strong outfit. His voice died in his throat as he took in the sight of the girl's familiar face in unfamiliar and super good attire. This Aoko with her long hair flowing in the breeze was different from the Aoko Sojiro knew. The resolute stance and posture she took exuded the strength of her will. She stared directly at him with a sharp-eyed, piercing gaze. Her eyes were glowing with the dim phosphoric light, enough to give Sojiro pause that he might be hallucinating. An icy coldness and a girl's strength. Sojiro lacked a sense of danger, but the sense of imbalance caused even him to feel the malice in the air. It was as though the Yuki Onna spirit of folklore had climbed out from a ghost story and appeared here in reality. That's the Snow Woman. You might know it as what Frostlass is based on in Pokemon.
Aozaki.
Instinctively, Sojiro took a step back. Surprised, he was starting to feel concerned. An unpleasant premonition rose to the surface, bringing with it a sense of anxiety. In spite of this, he felt obliged to honor urban etiquette by seeing if she was all right.
その顔を見るに何かあったのかと一応聞いておくんだけど。
Without acknowledging him, Aoko took a step forward. Her figure, this atmosphere, Sojiro found himself recalling a recent memory. Oh boy. His twisted and knotted apprehension melted away and was replaced with a glowing realization. The girl before him was very similar to someone he had seen before, that night in the park, though she had only seen her from behind. With increasing certainty causing him to swallow nervously, he noted that they might as well have been identical.
何をしていたかって話なら見ての通りよ。ここで獲物が通り過ぎるのを待ってたの。あなたが入ってから私も入って逃げ道をなくすつもりだったから。
Aoko said, perturbed by the swift change in plans. That's your concern? Sojiro was mightily relieved he had not gone to the wrong place. It was unclear whether he felt confident about dealing with what was to come, or if he had simply failed to grasp the hopelessness of the situation. Aoko ignored his obtuse response and continued.
私はね、しずきくん。嫌いな人とか憎い人とかは人並みにいるんだ。ただ、ちょっと変なのが敵になるやつの条件でね。
Is that the first cuss word in this game? Isn't this game rated M anyways? I'm pretty sure it is. I'm gonna check. It is, right? Oh, wait. Wait, it does say there. Level 9, 17 or older, yeah. So that makes sense. Cold emotion burned in her eyes. Her feet had already moved one step closer to Sojiro. Sojiro's sense of foreboding was growing stronger. Wondering if what he'd sensed was bloodlust, he retreated another step. Continuing as so, they maintained a distance of just 15 feet.
昔から私は嫌いな相手でも敵と思ったことはなかったの。でも逆に好きな相手を敵だと思うこともあった。理由は単純。
She held her right arm out. The light about her was no illusion.
当たり前のことだけど、私は私の感情を乱すやつが敵なのよ。
Her arm moved again. It was instantaneous. Something shot past Sojiro in the blink of an eye, missing him by just a foot to his left. That's not the expression I expected. Before his eyes, a blue light, something akin to a fireball, had ignited from nothing. He finally understood what was happening. She ignored his dim-witted reaction. Aoko muttered to herself. The fist-sized hole the blue light made in the House of Mirrors crackled and smoldered. A shot like that could easily cave in a human skull in addition to burning it to a crisp.
こんな射程で外すなんてアリスに見られたら自殺者ね。でもこれで分かったでしょ。二度目だものね。
Sojiro backed away swiftly. Things were beyond incomprehensible. He was close to losing the ability to think at all. All he could make out was the figure of the dependable student council president, or at least what he thought was the president, and the memories of the park that night 2 days ago. He had never experienced anything like this, though most people living in a civilized country would have never seen anything like it either. A lethal weapon that could kill with nothing more than the pull of a finger had a way of suspending the ability of its target to determine not just good and evil, but dreams and reality, past and future. And the more peaceful someone's life had been, the stronger that suspension was likely to be. All that one could think about was the fact that they were alive at the very moment. It was as if he was an unwritten character on a blank piece of white paper. There was no before, there was no after, there was only what came next. This was a very common thought process for anyone staring down the barrel of a gun.
命乞いはやめてね。意味ないから。でも、恨み事ならご自由に。殺す側の義務として一言一句聞いてあげる。
By saying it was pointless, she made it sound more like she would not listen to what he had to say. However, Sojiro was in such a state of shock that it did not even enter his mind to speak up. All he knew, for reasons unknown, was that the girl in front of him wanted him dead. That is a strong image. The glow.
嘘つきにも程がある。飛び丸のバカ。何がそんな生き物はいないだ。実際いるじゃないか、こんなお化けみたいなのが。
That's really funny. He's so stupid. His thought process is, well, why didn't he tell me? Sojiro felt that if he said that out loud, the second blast would come even quicker than last, so he kept it to himself. His mental expletive stirred his mind from paralysis to mere panic. This response came not from confidence, however. Someday out of the blue, someone is going to kill me. Well, it may have seemed like a baseless belief to hold.
そうだった。都会には殺人事件がある。ルールを破れば殺されるのは当たり前だって。ちゃんと教えてもらってた。
Oh my god, is he believing he's gonna die because he didn't pay to get in the park? To Sojiro, the situation seemed to perfectly align with his inexperienced understanding that the city was a coldly pragmatic place. As far as he was concerned in the moment, being killed by a classmate was not something to be surprised by. In a society where murder was possible, he was able to accept this sort of situation as natural. Of virtually no concern was a series of events that led to Aoko's aggression towards him. The only thing that truly confused him was Aoko's blue fireball. Sojiro swallowed with an audible gulp. To anyone who may have been watching, it was the response of a victim paralyzed by fear.
そういうことよ。ようやく理解してくれたわね。多くは語らないけど、あなたにはここで死んでもらう。魔術は隠匿するもの。なんて言っても、そっちには関係のないことだし。単に運がなかったって思えばいいわ。大事なのは、私があなたを殺したってことだけだから。
Done talking, Aoko once again lifted her right arm. God, this art. There was a hum like a machine. Blue light began to revolve around about her arm beneath her sleeve. This was taking longer than last time, leading Sojiro to believe that it was much stronger than the attack that was still scorching the wall behind him. The realization caused his panic to heighten.
いやなんだつまり始末するとかしないとかあの夜のお化けは青崎だったとか都会は本当に込み入ってるとかそういうことじゃなくて。
She's not part of the church. Don't worry about that, buddy. His thoughts became jumbled. Is he going to be like, wow, Christianity gives you superpowers? His heart pounded like a hammer. This was no time to be standing still. He was not sure if the girl in front of him was really human. And more importantly, even if he could accept the events unfolding before him, when all was said and done.
待て、人殺しはいけないんだぞ。
Yeah, because people die when they're killed. Even if it was a fact of life in the city, Sojiro was not about to lie down and die.
分かってるわよ、そんなことは。
Sojiro's scream, still entirely oblivious, was just the thing to invoke Aoko's full wrath. Oh, yo! That's cool! Aoko fired a barrage of blue magical bullets. In an instant, Sojiro dashed into the shadows behind him, into the entrance to the House of Mirrors. That's very reminiscent of her melty moves, right?
なんだい今のなんだ
He darted feverishly down the hall. After a mere few feet, he was left completely out of breath. This was due to the shock of seeing yet another attack fiercer than the first that he had never seen in his life, and because he couldn't shake the thought that if he had moved even a second later, he'd be dead. He could not afford to stop. The sound of merciless footsteps closed in behind him.
助かった。ここならなんとか。
He threw everything into his legs and sprinted. A straight, narrow passage about 60 feet long connected to the entrance to the main lobby. At this rate, if he could just make it to the lobby, he was sure he would be able to find as many hiding spots as he needed.
助かった。
He arrived in a large open space. This was the first floor lobby. There were 3 passageways. One led to the basement floor, one connected to the first floor maze, the other was a set of stairs leading to the second floor. Sojiro did not particularly care which he chose, so trusting his intuition made a run for the first floor maze when... Oh? He smacked his head into a transparent wall, a bounded field. Never mind.
ええ、面倒だけど、それならフェアでしょ。追いかける方にも逃げる方にも有利不利がある。
A somehow cheerful voice echoed in his direction. There was no need for Sojiro to even turn around. In the very same mirror he had crashed into, he could see Aoko Ozaki's figure slowly
それ
approaching.
と、1階の奥にある出口は封鎖しといたから。結界じゃなくて物理的に。
Oh, well, there you go.
やりすぎて封鎖っていうより瓦礫？土砂崩れ？どっちでもいっか。とにかく下手に出口に近づくと崩落に巻き込まれるから。
Me too. I'd run. Panicked by the impending footsteps, Sojiro groped for the wall. He could see the stairs to the second floor. He did not understand what Aoko had meant earlier, but he at least knew that the first floor was not going to save him.
ま、 私としてはそっちのが助かるけど、形式上事故死の方が後始末とか楽だから。
Behind him was a creature beyond words. As she continued her idle taunting, she lifted her right arm ostentatiously. Even from above her clothes, one could see some kind of strange, incongruous pattern upon her body. The veins beneath her skin, they made it seem as though something inhuman was circulating her body. Whether out of pity or repulsion, Sojiro stopped just for a moment. His pursuer evaded his gaze.
ああ、これ？普段は塗り薬で隠しているんだけど、今日は特別。魔術刻印って言ってね。魔術師の証みたいなものよ。
So that is your crest specifically. Okay. That's not your circuits, that's your crest.
ほら、
Okay.
光が回ってるでしょ？これがさっきのスナップ。わかりやすく言うと弾丸の元。今日は調子いいし、私魔力を効率よく使うのだけは自信あるし。うん。あと30回ぐらいかな。さっきみたいな装着ができるのは。
I never considered that they had, like, technically ammo in the form of magical energy. Perhaps she was on an emotional high, for her voice became frighteningly friendly. Oh, that's a puppy face. The substance of the conversation could not have been any more unsettling, however.
そもそも何を言っているかよくわからないんだけど、青崎。
わからない？弾数はあと30発ってこと。そこまで逃げ切ればあなたの勝ちよ。とりあえず今日のところはね。
今日はって明日もあるのかな。
Sojiro knit his brows. Aoko's expression creased into a scowl at his behavior. Although he was still panicking, it seemed that deep down he still did not feel the full weight of the crisis. She knew that he still didn't get it.
宣言はしたわ。自由時間はこれでおしまい。まだ罵り足りないだろうけど、ま、その手の時間はキリがないしね。この辺りで諦めて。
It appeared Aoko had prepared this theatrical dialogue ahead of time, not to allow her opponent time for futile pleading, but to give him the time to curse her, his killer. Such forthrightness was her modus operandi. With this victim, however, it was not going as she had hoped.
とにかくそういうことだから。じゃ、狩りの時間と行きましょうか。
Her voice was void of emotion, and her eyes ruthless as they bored into her prey. This time, Sojiro finally accepted that he was going to die. Or you could run. Silent as the dead, it stepped into the remnants of a dream that had long since seen no visitors. There was no wind this night, nor a soul to be seen. Still it heard the echoes from within, clasped its hands together and grinned. Its form, with hands clasps, resembled that of a budding tulip. The bearer of this artificial flower reflected in the cloudy mirror of the ticket attendant's office next to the gate. Next to it stood a display board corroded by years upon years of rust. Oh. Number of visitors today, 2. Number of blank today, blank. The board had graffiti crudely scrawled atop one of the words. It was replaced with deaths. The records board had long fallen to disrepair. After taking a full 10 seconds to adjust what it was looking at, it made its own revision. Number of visitors today, 3. Number of deaths today, 1. After appending this number with an index finger, she smiled like a flower. Then she began to walk toward the source of the sound. She? Huh? It had been 10 minutes since this rhapsody had begun to echo from the House of Mirrors. The amusement park's entrance returned to as it was before, soulless. I thought that was one of those little robots again, but maybe not. It did say index finger. In the end, even if Sojiro had been the luckiest man alive, there was no way he should have been able to escape. The question, however, was how much of this was by design, and how much by sheer coincidence. Even Aoko, who had made all the arrangements, had no answer. Indeed, there were only 3 things she could say. It was taking longer than expected, he was putting up more resistance than she had anticipated, and that choosing the House of Mirrors was a mistake. She'd really screwed the pooch on this one. The location itself was an excellent choice, as the House of Mirrors was a perfect hunting ground, but seeing her own incompetence reflected in the mirrors was beginning to grate on her. My dude has so many iframes. The moment Aoko's right arm began to glow, Sojiro made a beeline for the staircase in front of him. A strobing series of blue flashes lit the room behind him. The hunter calmly followed her prey, and the prey desperately ran for his life up the stairs. Oh, the smug with the bullets is strong. In stark contrast to Sojiro's frenzied escape, Aoko walked briskly up the stairs. She elected not to run after her prey in order to maintain a set distance. As she lacked confidence in her accuracy, the hardest thing for her to deal with would be if he charged right at her and went down fighting. But at a distance of 30 or so feet, he posed no threat. By the time her prey drew near, she could fire 10 shots and hit with at least 4 of them. Their positioning just a moment ago hadn't been ideal. At that distance, in a space that open, if he flanked and rushed her, there was a chance, however small, that it could turn into a fistfight. Currently, Aoko's best weapon was the bullets from her right arm. She was going to capitalize on that advantage. It was in her best interest not to close the gap between them. If there was a good time to approach, it was only after her prey had become exhausted and lost the will to continue. Would she pierce his leg, shoot him in the back, or perhaps he would just give up after losing himself in the labyrinth? The hunt would be when her target sustained some sort of injury and became unable to run. On Sojiro's end, he could barely bite back on screaming as he bolted through the maze. Even running in a straight line became difficult, much less searching for an exit. If you've never been in a House of Mirrors, it's actually super disorienting, like, you run into stuff. The corridor stretched out far before him, or so the mirrors blocking the path made it seem. Panicked, he made a turn to the right. Clutching his head in his right arm, Sojiro led with his left, groping through the air to see whether a waller was there or not. He dove down to the hall to the left, narrowly dodging the bullets targeting his life. Urged on by the sound of approaching footsteps, he ran without thinking. The last one was close. A hair closer would have meant his life. He caught the odor of burned hair from the back of his neck. He was very lucky, or perhaps very unlucky. If he were actually lucky, he would not have been in the situation in the first place. The second floor of the House of Mirrors was structured like a giant spiral. It wound left, starting from the outside wall. Eventually, it would lead to a dead end. The more he tried to escape, the more cornered he would become, as though he were trapped in a twisted guillotine. His stifled screams threatened to leak out as complaints. No matter what he did, he was going to be killed. All of his struggling merely served to prolong the inevitable. Yet he ran. No matter how many mirrored walls he rammed himself into, he ran. Even after crashing so hard that his forehead bled and he saw stars, he ran. Pain shot through him at every turn. The more frantically he ran, the more intensely he smashed into the invisible walls. His body began to understand this rule and begged him not to run anymore. His breath was already ragged after sprinting a couple hundred feet. No matter how he thought about it, this was not normal. This was way too crazy. This was all a bad joke. If he turned around now, she would apologize for taking it too far. His mind had gone blank. As his body continued to slam into the wall mirrors again and again, his feet slowed as they began to believe that perhaps it really was all a joke. But then, he felt a chill, a touch of death upon his neck. Uh-oh. It would not be an exaggeration to say that Sojiro knew this kind of terrible chill far too well. Ever since he had arrived in the city, he had come face to face with more than 1 or 2 near-death experiences. For someone who did not understand city life, his present predicament was not unlike when he experienced traffic on the streets or the commuter rush on the station platform. He was far from the innocent babe. He was far from an innocent babe, unable to comprehend life or fear. Rather, everything he had known became irrelevant when he was flung into a completely different cultural sphere. Even society's promises of safety, something urbanites took for granted, were threats unknown. So, he was used to this already. Though if he were to be honest, he was dissatisfied with some things. Things superfluous to necessity. This world was overflowing with valueless things, and they were all dangerous in some way. Even the everyday necessities sold at the convenience store were, as far as he was concerned, amazing tools. Civilization had raised the standard of living so high that had numbed humanity's sense of danger. The city's constant pursuit of wealth and convenience was a poison to a country boy like Sojiro. And he did not have the capacity to accept these conveniences. That it was possible for such conveniences to easily and suddenly be misused and cause unintended accidents had always made him anxious. Why? He had to wonder why he was even here. How ironic. It took the real threat of death to finally make him realize, like a divine revelation, what he'd failed to understand until now. He always had to expect the unexpected, like card captors. Near-death experiences were more common than one might think. To begin with, safety was something that came at a price. Being alive meant that the opposite was always lurking around the corner. It was just like a street light at night. When the sun rose, its illumination would naturally disappear. Another barrage of strange projectiles whizzed mercilessly by him. He recalled in the back of his mind the charred remains of someone at the hands of that blue flame 2 nights prior. Somehow the situation reminded him of a horse being led by a dangling carrot. For now he lifted his head and continued to run through the labyrinth. But for what purpose? Though he knew the pain in his chest was very real, he felt disconnected from it. The night sky visible through the skyline was a muddy ultramarine, no longer resembling the one he knew. And managed to calm himself. Sojiro began to laugh in despair, as though something rather precious had been broken. Everything had become meaningless anyway. Even so, his legs somehow made their way forward at the sight of her reflection in the mirror. Like a game of cat and mouse, Sojiro fled through the labyrinth of mirrors. Then after 4 minutes, that strangely unreal tension ended. The 9th shot of blue light hit inches away from him. Was that blood? It exploded the moment it made impact, launching Sojiro into the opposite wall. Of all the fire he had taken thus far, this shot indisputably brought him closest to death. Groaning, he collapsed to the floor. His back was on fire with pain. He was not bleeding, and he was lucky he could even still scream. Yet, his body refused to move. Physically and mentally, he still had something to spare. The pain was not so bad that it was preventing him to stand up. It was just that there was a skylight above him, and he could glimpse the dark of the night sky beyond. The feeling that overcame him was a raw, selfish bout of grief. It was just so cruel. Have to stare at that for the remainder of whatever short life he had left. Sojiro's ragged breath slowed. For all intents and purposes, he had given up. He had given up running away from the sound of pursuing footsteps, perhaps even the problem at the root of everything. Talk about someone who looks on the bright side of things. Sojiro Shizuki felt that in any other circumstance he would never... Felt things that in any other circumstance he would never feel. Incidentally, without exaggeration or embellishment, this was the only mistake he had ever made in his entire life. Staring vacantly into the night sky above, Sojiro listened as the footsteps drew nearer.
Give up?
It was the closest her voice had ever been to him. Perhaps feeling that he really had given up, she approached his collapsed form. In the dark, mirror-lined corridor, he could not make out her expression. Without a word, Sojiro raised his eyes to meet his murderer.
返事がないならそれでいいけど。調子狂うわ。普通どうして殺そうとするのかぐらい聞くものじゃない？
Aoko spoke from within the shadows. His eyes widened in bewilderment. Now that she had mentioned it, he realized that would have been the obvious question to ask. He had more or less picked up on the fact that he was being killed for learning some secret, but it was human nature to want to learn more. A simple affirmation. His face was a mixture of resignation and a forlorn longing. For a moment he thought, before... He responded in a mature, subdued voice. Oh. His response was clear, rather gallantly so.
そう。じゃ、殺すけど。死ぬの怖くないの？
怖いに決まってる。何より痛そうだ。
His face turned wry as he objected, to which Aoko frowned. As nonchalant as he could be, he was honest about his feelings.
そりゃ怖いでしょ。私だって怖いと思うし。でも悪いわね。我慢して。人でなしと罵ってくれて結構よ。今の私は本当にその通りだから。そういった意味じゃあんたと同じ。普通の道徳がないのよ。だから必要なら人も殺せる。
Sojiro's finger twitched in response to her indifferent tone, as if to say that despite having given up on just about everything, his body could not let those words slide.
人殺しなんて良くないぞ。
分かってるって言ってるでしょ。
Aoko raised her right hand. The light from the crest illuminated her face. It goes without saying that her expression was unchanged. She was not crying, nor was she smiling. She was a young woman who had excised her feelings. Deal with it was another thing Sojiro could not let slide. Sojiro could read on Aoko's face that she was not herself. She was in pain, and to a degree he had never seen in her.
すまない。ちょっといいかな。
何？ここまで悲壮感を盛り上げておいて、やっぱり逃げるなんてのは却下よ。
He unconsciously smiled at Aoko's ruthless counter and breathed a sigh of relief. He had misread the pain he saw in her face. This was the same Aoko. Sojiro laughed out loud in genuine joy, a laugh that most other people would have taken as an insult.
遺言でも聞いてあげようと思った私が甘かった。っていうか、今の小バカにした笑いがあんたの遺言ってことで OK？
いや、そうじゃなくて、あそこにいる人は青崎の友人なのか？
Oh boy. Out of nowhere, Sojiro pointed behind Aoko.
はあ？
Aoko thought that it must have been that old overused distraction technique. If this had been a Japanese comedy act, this would be the part where she gave him a whack with a paper fan, but after giving it a second thought, she realized Sojiro didn't have the capacity for understanding old or even new tricks.
あんた何言って。
Oh, that's a doll thing. You can see it in the reflection there. Spooky. Perhaps his honest disposition had been to his benefit. Without thinking, Aoko gave in to her curiosity and turned her gaze toward the direction in which his finger was pointed. And there... Spooky! Something that should have not been in there in the maze. Something with a creaking, wooden smile. Spooky! Sans? It was the ominous, creepy, uncanny figure of a girl. Just as soon as that blue eye lit up. Just in my brain. Da-da-da-da! I like how there's fade outs like it's the end, like it's a commercial break. It's good. An unusual figure with 2 arms and 2 legs stood silently in the darkness. If only for a moment its beauty, which was even apparent from afar, dulled the insanity of the current situation. Ooh, don't like that. Oh, frick, that's spooks. Extend, extend, extend. The utterly unknown threat made Aoko freeze on the spot. Avoiding it didn't even occur to her. Humans possess intelligence and knowledge, but when confronted with the unknown, they fail to process what to do and... Oh! Did you get God? A shriek escaped Aoko's mouth. The magical attack crossed the 30-foot gap in an instant. The arm of the girl, who had appeared at the rear of the corridor, was slender and quick. It extended to a near impossible length, striking Aoko from behind. Aoko crashed into the wall as she fought back, an anguished whisper. The attacker retracted her arm. Sojiro sprang to his feet. He darted to her side and used all his strength he could muster to get her back to her feet. He could not believe how light she was. In Sojiro's mind, Aoko was an extraordinary individual. He'd expected that if he were to ever touch her, it would be apparent that she was far stronger than he. But in reality, she felt about as heavy as you would expect a 100-pound girl to feel. That is a stupid sentence. That is a stupid sentence. Can't believe the 100-pound girl felt 100 pounds. Meanwhile, Wow. So that hair is interesting. That hair is very interesting. Meanwhile, that thing continued to reel in its arm as if it were some sort of mechanism. Having extended more than 30 feet from the elbow joint, it clanked as it returned to its previous shape and size.
大丈夫か？
やめてよ。わからないわ。なんでそんな顔できるの？
He's very simple, you have to understand. Aoko tore her hand away from Sojiro's. Suddenly, she felt her knees buckle from under her, but Sojiro caught her before she could hit the ground and helped her to her feet.
無理するな。で、あいつは知り合いか？
He looked back at the eerie shadow 30 feet away as it finished retracting its arm.
そうね。似たようなやつとは命をせめぎ合った仲よ。
Aoko grabbed her lower back as she answered. A searing pain shot through her.
でも、痛いっちゃ痛いけど、打撲だけ。
I don't know. There was some electricity going everywhere. That might be a part of it.
あれだけ絶好の奇襲をしておいて。それとも、この距離じゃ当たっても致命傷にならない。
Maybe it gave you a debuff.
なんて、あるわけないか。何か別の意味があると見るべきね。
Aoko tried to steady her breathing as she assessed the damage done to her back. The pain was quick to fade and her breathing returned to normal. For the time being, her motor functions were no longer hindered, which meant the real damage was elsewhere. Cool.
青崎、あれ。
分かってるわ。黙ってて。
Blue light glowed across the gloom. The magical energy generated by her breathing was accumulating in her right arm. I was gonna say, is it gonna seal her? Is he gonna seal her crest there or something? Is he gonna block her circuits? If magical energy was the fuel, the formula was the igniter. For Aoko, this was little more than a reenactment of 2 evenings ago. Next time the puppet extended its arm, Aoko would fire a magic bullet as fast as she could. Like Dalsim, right? Dalsim throws out the arm. Is her butt facing forward? No, that's the top of the ball joints. Okay, never mind. I thought she was booty out. Again, that hair is very interesting. But like Dalsim, you know, you throw out the arm, and then you punch the arm, and the hitbox is the extended arm. A battle at approximately 30 feet. As long as Aoko could secure a 2-second window, she could create a counterattack to end their duel. It made its move. With its head tilted down, there was no expression to be seen, and in the darkness, its apparent age was impossible to make out. To the two humans, the puppet was not dissimilar to a faceless ghost. Again, that hair. Because it looks like Aoko's hair, but possibly red. Its left arm slowly came up with a grinding sound. Its movements were dull, as if the joints were rusty. That is not a booty. Good. The right arm, which had been extended earlier, hung at its side. The puppet's mouth was hidden by its long locks. The sense was that it was smiling. Does it have a mouth? We don't see it.
さっきと用途が違う。あれが本命。しずきくん、どいて。
She threw herself into Sojiro and extended her hand. Its arm extended at the very moment. The timing was impeccable. In a single second, Aoko's magic bullet scored a direct hit on the puppet's arm, reversing its trajectory and sending it crashing into the puppet's body with a violent explosion. Or at least, that is what would have happened had the magic formula been invoked. There it is. Yep. She barely avoided being struck once again. When her magecraft failed her, intuition took over, and she managed to get away.
やられた。最初のはそういうことか。
She clenched her teeth in frustration, her thoughts racing a mile a minute. Fight or flight. It only had one arm left, which would take time to retract. This was the best shot Aoko had at defeating it. If she could evade the right arm just a fraction, she'd get close enough to...
Vivo instom, solitaire reputres quinferis. Ictius mes obitus dies, et meus nativus dies. Teobeam.
Is that Italian? It's either... No, I think that's Latin. In slumber I live, in dirt I rot alone. Today's the day I was died and was born. I come to you. Okay. Spooky. A crackle echoed through the corridor. The poetic murmurs contained enough magical energy for a mage to perceive. The verse itself was Latin, there we go, but it contained hints of the language of curses, Gander. I was going to say there was some language in there that didn't seem Latin. Originally, they were words meant to curse a hated adversary. However,
Mer animae mortalis, otem eftura negata sunt. Manes sum, animam definire ambiguum est. Teodi et te am, conveniamus insomnio ipso.
huh. My life is immortal, though my future was destroyed. I am a ghost, the definition of life is ethereal. I hate you, I love you, let us meet in a dream. The puppet was directing the words at itself. Curses beget curses. The victim calls a curse down on the assailant, creating a vicious cycle of negativity. The incantation was meant to do just that. However, this was ultimately a one-puppet show, an unprecedented source of power akin to auto-intoxication. As unbelievable as it seemed, the cycle of curses had turned into a perpetual motion device. So basically, she works exactly like how Van Gogh does in Fate Grand Order, giving yourself curses to power you up.
何それレベル高すぎじゃない
Aoko abandoned the idea of digging her heels in. It was time to flee with all due haste.
何してんのあんたも来る
He's a bit in shock. You know, give him time to understand. She grabbed Sojiro's hand and ran as fast as she could deeper into the realm of mirrors. The crackling voice continued its murmur behind them.
Proximi mich negligentes ferunt. Omnes nos peccantes fims.
Among Us!
Et omnes nos edem fims. Omnes nos peccatores sums. Venite domum meum. Lut simile somnium. Et pulvere simile quotidianum. Corporebo.
I'll say the pronunciation on the Latin is pretty good. There's definitely a little bit of, you can tell it's a Japanese voice actress, but it's pretty good. You got some good stuff there. She practiced. Sorry, I just saw it Among Us there. My neighbors neglected me, not an innocent Among Us. We are all sinners. We are all sinners. Welcome to my house. May we die a muddy death from dust to dust, gouge out your heart. That's terrifying, actually. Don't like that. So, like, is it going to be firing Gander shots, or is it going to be doing something else? Aoko fought against the pain in her back as she ran through the mirrored corridor. She dragged Sojiro by the hand.
Aozaki, 傷は
別に背骨がしびれてる程度よ内臓は平気だし出血もないみたい
She cursed inwardly at how much of a mess she felt, though. Unlike Sojiro, Aoko did not run into any transparent walls. Thanks to not to superior sight, but rather preparation, she'd hammered the layout of the building into her memory.
平気ってわかるのか
そりゃ自分の体だもの身体管理は基礎中の基礎よ
True, true. Aoko's matter-of-fact answer contrasted with Sojiro's nervous questioning. The corridor grew shorter with each and every left turn. At first, they were able to advance in a straight line for about 100 feet at a time. By now, they were forced to turn a corridor every 50 feet or so.
あいつはあの夜の
多分ね同じタイプだと思う貴重なオートマタを惜しげもなく使い捨てるなんてよっぽど
Oh,
お金持ちなんだろうけど
yeah, it is an automata, isn't it? The same type that we fight in Grand Order. I never even put that together. Sojiro furrowed his brows. He was grateful that she was answering his questions, but baffled by the strange words she was using.
青崎ストップもう随分走ったぞあいつは曲がり角一つ分向こうだ少し休もう
That's not how it works, bud. His words suggested that he was still concerned about her injuries. Aoko shook her head in irritation.
あの距離を狙ってくる相手に通路一つ分のリードは無意味よ
Sojiro nodded. With that matter settled, he
な
asked,
んで俺を連れて行ってるんだ
That is a good question.
逃げられたくないからじゃないバカ
Answering curtly, Aoko glared at her naive prey. The two of them headed for the next corner. Their legs began to slow as they rounded one more. Aoko rubbed her back as she tried to catch her breath. Though Aoko had insisted that she was fine, it appeared to have been bravado. Even the usually clueless Sojiro felt the desperation they were in. He stood behind Aoko with his arms folded. While they had a moment, he tried to make sense of everything. First, Aoko had nearly killed him. Though he was saved at the last possible second, it was by the strange, stretchy woman Aoko had burned to ashes 2 nights prior. He could barely make it out that night, but he considered it a her because it looked female. It had boobies, and he recognizes that females have those. The woman's attack wounded Aoko's back and forced her to flee. Aoko had taken Sojiro with her, claiming the reason she did so was to prevent her prey from escaping. In other words,
青崎はまだ諦めてないんだな。
当たり前よ。あんなやつ、仮に2体と半分始末しても、あんた用の余力は残せるわ。
her tone was sharp, but even Sojiro could see that she was struggling to stay confident. The damage done to her body was too much to afford her any optimism. God, the mirrors make it so we can both see characters, and it's so good. Still, the fury in her eyes refused to accept her circumstances.
中がところどころショートしてる。あの右腕は回路を混戦させるジャミングってわけね。
Though the proper response would have been for her to tremble in fear, she did nothing but shake her fists in anger. The description of formulae was only supposed to work on absolute beginners. If it had been her roommate, the arm would have been repelled the instant it hit her and the attacker's circuits burned out, rather than her own. Attempting to establish a link to the magic circuits of another mage was like presenting your heart on a silver platter. It would be of no use in a battle against a superior mage. And yet, her adversary had been designed to do just that. Coupled with the attacks on areas of Misaki under Aoko's jurisdiction these last few days, it was a clear statement from the enemy, who, as of 2 days ago, had revealed itself as a fellow mage. In other words, the puppet saw Aoko as no threat at all.
敵ながら正確な判断だこと。
While she was still angry, the whirlwind of emotions within her started to fade. Her face was that of a hunter far beyond her years.
なんか俺の時より真剣だな。
まあね、あんたの時は遊びが入ってたし。
Sojiro was not sure whether to feel happy or sad at that.
わからないことだらけで何を聞いていいかわからないんだけど、一つだけいいか。
Aoko didn't respond. Her eyes were focused on the darkness before them. The silence was heavy and the darkness was like a noose closing in on them. But Sojiro continued in spite of her indifference.
青崎はあいつも殺すのか。
A silence fell over them. It was as if the gloom was pulling them in. No response. Their breathing was the only sound echoing in the dim corridor. There stood Sojiro, forcing her to confront her sins, and the magician girl who continued to ignore him. They spent a few seconds, seemingly frozen in time.
そう。それがあなたのキーワードみたいね。
Aoko whispered in a lifeless tone. Her sigh was tinged with both resignation and contempt.
何？
独り言よ、忘れて。それと、言っとくけど、あいつは人間じゃないわ。信じられないだろうけど、自分の意志で動く人形なの。この前のも、今のやつもね。
Sojiro nodded as he processed the information. Not only did he not doubt her story, but he seemed to have accepted it at face value.
なんか落ち着いてるわね、あなた。
まさかもう何が何だかわからないからあまり考えないことにしてるだけだ。ただ人形に関しては別にどうということはない。
もしかして他でも自動人形を見たことあるとか？
都会の人形ってああいうものじゃないのか？
Huh? What? Me too? She barely stopped herself from falling to her knees. Of course, how could she have forgotten? She was dealing with a bona fide natural-born moron. As a student who transferred from the isolation of the mountains like an endangered species, his utter lack of common sense rendered everything miraculous as mundane. If automobiles were moving hunks of metal, then moving puppets were nothing to write home about. Wait, what that meant? To him, the incident from the other night hadn't been extraordinary at all. He might have even assumed it was an everyday occurrence in the city.
参った。いっぺん頭の中覗いてみたいっていうか、ほんと、ここまで来ると感心するわ。調子が狂うのも当然だった。普通は私に襲われた時点でもっと違う反応をするはずなのに。化け物とか、お化けとかさ。でもあなたにとっては、そういうこともある。で済まされてたわけなんだ。なんかバカみたいね、私。
Her strained face returned to normal for a moment. It hit her. There had been another way to handle this without anyone getting hurt. But the damage had already been done. There were no do-overs in life, nor should there be. Her own mistaken assumptions had sent the situation spiraling out of control. But now that Sojiro was involved, she had to make sure her secret was safe with him. Even if there had been another better option, that ship had sailed. Human relationships were ultimately driven by mutual misunderstandings, like tapestries woven from mismatched intentions. Okay, I have to call it here. I'm just muted there. My throat was killing me. We will continue our fleeing next time because I currently can barely talk. Oh boy, I was going so well, and I expected this to be over soon. But don't worry, I'm just coughing. So we'll see you guys next time for some more. We'll see you then. Ciao.